Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Deirdre Van Nest, who's the creator of Crazy Good Talk Blueprint. Deirdre, welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Mike. I'm thrilled to be here.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you because I always love looking at the names people pick for their business or their email address or their, proprietary process. And I love the word blueprint because it's like, ooh, you found the way and take this step and then the next step. And then it's not just how to create a good talk. It's a crazy good talk. So I am really excited to learn from you. So give us a little bit of your background and what your entrepreneurial journey has been like to this point.
Yeah, and I have to say that name was birthed at a women writing and whiskey conference in Bozeman, Montana, Mike.
Wow.
And I was walking across the street, the main street from the Lark Hotel and I don't remember the name of the hotel where the conference was. And thank God there's not a lot of people in Montana, not a lot of cars, because I literally stopped in the middle of the road and I was working on rebranding and renaming my company and the name of the blueprint. And like, it just came to me. I'm like, crazy good. I'm like, that's it. Yep. Crazy good.
And you were at what type of an event?
It was a writing event, but the three W's were women, writing, and then you had to drink a little whiskey.
Okay.
So that started my my interest in learning more about whiskeys. Before that, I was not interested in that, but pretty good, actually.
Well, the interesting thing to me is sometimes the eureka moments come when you are out of the grind and you're away. And you might be at an event learning things, but you're kind of in a new environment and maybe there was some downtime. And that's when those creativity light bulbs seem to fire.
Yes, and it's funny because the best compliment I ever got as a speaker was early on in my career. Someone came up to me and he said, Deirdre, that wasn't just a good talk. That was crazy good. And I was like, oh my gosh, thank you. What a cool compliment. Like I love that, Mike. And I always remembered it, but I didn't remember it enough to name my company that. Yeah. It wasn't until later on. It was like 5 years later where like the light bulb moment happened in the middle of the street in Bozeman, Montana.
So interesting that we need to be, right before we started talking or recording here, we were talking about how time flies so fast when you're busy. And we need to take time to smell the roses and all those cliches that we can talk about. But here's something that's really interesting you just said. You heard the phrase crazy good talk years ago, years before. And it went in when they were out there. You were busy. Oh, thanks. High five. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.
Yeah.
Didn't really resonate with you. But yet it was in there. And maybe if you had been talking about or rebranding at that point, maybe it would have. But it's interesting how our life experiences and people that say things or conversations, it might hit now, it might hit later, but it's always there. You got to be aware and watching.
Well, absolutely. And that's why when I'm working with my clients and particularly my advisors, and we're working on picking the name for their blueprints, I always tell them, do not get hung up on having the perfect name. Like if you have the best name now, that's awesome. But I'll tell you what, calling it ABC Blueprint is better than your competitor down the street who I promise you does not have a blueprint. And trust that the perfect, and there's no perfect, so I'm using that a little facetiously. If you could see me, I'm doing quotes with my fingers. The perfect name can come 5 or 10 years down the line. Like when I started, Mike, my process was called Speak and Get Results. And I had that name, which was very good for about 5 years. And then I morphed into the Crazy Good Talks Blueprint. But had I waited, I would have lost out on a lot of opportunity because I was waiting for the perfect name. Don't wait.
Yeah. We can throw out a lot of, little sayings and quotes, jump and grow your wings all the way down and all of those kind of things, or done is better than perfect. But it's like the Tony Robbins teaches about CANI, constant, never-ending improvement. So get something out there, get it working, and then iterate and reiterate and and listen and talk to your clients and go, hey, how did that resonate with you? And listen to what they say and the words that they use. Like, hey, by the way, before you were thinking of coming to working with me as your advisor with your retirement planning, what were some of the struggles you were dealing with, and ask some of these questions and listen and record it if you can. And now all of a sudden you're learning their languaging and their messaging, and you could be something could be plucked out for your blueprint, your proprietary process.
Well, I had a client who her specialty is in divorce financial planning. She's amazing. I'll give her name is Michelle Monson-Klisenich. She's here in the Twin Cities, but that's her expertise and her specialty. And early on, the first iteration of her blueprint, we called it the Move Forward with Your Life Blueprint, because I said, Michelle, what are these women who are coming into your office getting divorced saying? And she said that they just want to move forward with their life.
Yeah.
I just want to move forward with my life. And so I'm like, let's name it that.
Yeah.
You know, and it can be that simple.
And you know what's interesting is, and maybe you know this, I learned this from Brian Tracy at one of his live events about 2 decades ago. So I'll give him the tip of the hat. Hey, Deirdre, what's everyone's favorite radio station?
Oh, Whiffam?
Yep.
WIFM.
Yep. What's in it for me? Well, guess what?
Yes.
They just want to move forward blueprint wasn't the I'm the best divorce financial advisor blueprint. It wasn't about her. It's about what the clients want. It's their aspirational identity. What are they aspiring to do? What is their pain point that they want to get through and past? Well, they just want to move forward. Oh, well then, boom.
Boom. Make it simple.
Yeah.
I was just working with a group of clients, advisors right before this recording for the podcast, and we were working on how to craft what's called an open with a bang question. One of the principles of being the type of communicator who really grabs people's attention and gets people's heads out of their phones and onto you is by within the first, 5 to 30, and I'd even say 1 to 5 seconds, be able to grab people's attention. And you can do that with a really powerful question. So we were practicing crafting questions for messaging. And one of the things that we were working on is making things simple and making sure you use what one of my mentors calls pillow talk, Mike.
Yeah.
And pillow talk is using the real words your clients use with each other when they're going to sleep at night and waking up in the morning. Right? Yeah. Don't say words like liquidity, portfolio, asset management. Like your clients aren't saying that to each other. Right? Use the words that they're using and actually use their words in the blueprint. That's going to make them feel more connected. It's going to be more attractive to your ideal client.
I've heard it said Technobabble. Like, okay, we know RIA and IU this and all these acronyms and all these it's like, come on.
Yes.
And Technobabble is you're so smart about all this stuff that you can just blab it on with your buddies that are financial advisors at a networking event. You can just talk shop. But the average your client, they don't know what that is, and you need to have this bridge. It's the kind of like bridge, and you need to go, oh, well, it's kind of like how. Oh, well, you should have said that in the first place. And wasn't it Albert Einstein that said something to the effect of, if you can't explain what you do to a 10-year-old, you don't even understand fully what you do?
Well, and that's the thing, and that's what we were talking about in this course that I was just teaching right before this. I was like, okay, everyone, this question has to make sense to a 10-year-old, and if it doesn't, and I don't care in their audience for this assignment with CEOs, I said I don't care if it's the top CEO in the country, you need to be able to explain it to a 10-year-old if there's a 10-year-old in the room. And the thing here, if I may just add a little something here, Mike, about communication and where we're at in society today and in the marketplace today. Things have really changed. So a few decades ago, it was the advisor's job to show and prove that they were credible, right? There was a generation of people who really, yes, I want you to prove to me that you're the expertise. And a lot of advisors grew up in that model that they needed to prove that they were the expert. Well, that day has passed. That day has passed. We are no longer in that type of marketplace any longer. People are assuming if you're in the industry, you got your credentials, like you're credible. What is most important now is that when you communicate, people feel something.
Yeah.
If they do not feel something, they will not work with you. So, the job as a communicator these days is not so much to make sure people get what you're saying. It's to make sure they feel what you're saying.
And do you ever tag on to that teaching with the Maya Angelou quote?
Tell me the quote. Oh, they'll remember how you made them feel?
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
I don't. But you
it's
could.
The same, you could. It's the same concept. It's like, facts, wah, 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 numbers, okay, whatever, I'm the best, you need this, okay. But if you can say something and communicate something that resonates with someone, and almost kind of like a pattern interrupt, like, what was that you said? But not in a weird way, not quack like a duck, pattern interrupt, but just like, hold on. I had no clue that this would call. Okay, now how does that work?
Right. Yes.
That's huge.
Absolutely.
So then how do you, what is one of the techniques you teach on how to make sure that a commonplace message is resonating so that your prospect and your audience feels the message?
Yeah, there's a variety of techniques. I would say I'm hesitating using the word simplest because it's not, there's a lot of nuances. I'll say maybe the most powerful, let's say it that way. The most powerful would be storytelling.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And in my world, there are 3 types of stories that every advisor needs to have in their toolkit. Do you want me to go over what they are?
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Okay. So the first, and this is the most critical, this is actually the foundational story. This type of story, when we work with clients, this is the story that we are helping them write or writing for them that should really be the cornerstone of all their marketing and all their communication. And we call it the why story. And the why story is why you do what you do and why you care about the people you serve. That story is like adding lighter fluid to all your conversations, presentations, and marketing activities. And so just to give you 2 examples. So I actually stumbled upon the power of the why story much by accident. So for me, I started speaking and teaching in the industry probably about 2009, 2010. And for years, I was really caught up in the I just have to prove that I'm credible to you trap.
Yeah.
Right? That I think a lot of us get into, particularly early on in our career. And so I relied heavily on the other 2 types of stories that are important. And I'll talk about what those are in a moment. Okay. But I relied heavily on those 2 story types. I wasn't even aware that the why story was important or existed because I really just thought if I was working with advisors, if I was on, doing a keynote, I really thought as long as I gave them the content in an engaging way, so I was giving it to people in an engaging way, they were feeling things, but I didn't think that they had to feel anything about me. Does that make sense, Mike? Like I just had to give them great tools and great content.
And they should get it.
And I was just a vessel.
Okay.
I didn't think that the vessel mattered.
Yeah.
I was just a conduit for the content.
Got it.
And
but people want to connect with something.
Yeah, I just thought as long as they connected with the content, I was sort of irrelevant.
Yeah.
Okay. And so have you ever been in a place in your career where like things are going well, but you start to feel a little dissatisfied? Does that ever happen to you over the course of your career?
No, it has never happened, and I don't know what you're talking about. you wouldn't be human you wouldn't be human if you didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, like in 2015, I got to this point where something was just off, Mike. Like I was just like something's off, but I couldn't figure out what it was. And I think I'm sometimes I'm a fast learner, other times I'm a slow learner. But it took me like 2 years to figure out what was wrong. And at the base of it was I felt like every time I got on the stage, I left a part of myself outside the room. That's the best way I could describe this.
Okay.
And so I prayed about it for 2 years. I talked to colleagues and it was just this process of uncovering. And finally, what I realized was what was missing was me. I finally realized this unconscious thought process that I had, that it didn't matter that I was just a vessel and it didn't matter who delivered the information. And that was no longer enough for me. Like that might have been true, but it was no longer enough for me as a practitioner.
Yeah.
And so I decided that I was going to share a part of my heart and share my why story. And I shared my why story for the first time on January 11th, 2017. I was in Minneapolis doing a training for a group of advisors. I shared the story about my mom and dad being in a car accident when I was 10. My mom died. And I talked about in that story why financial services is so important to me, why I'm obsessed with helping advisors help other people, because I know that life changes in a snap. Yeah. And I know that many people have a very difficult time recovering because they heap financial tragedy on top of emotional and devastating loss, right? And so I share this story. It's an expanded version of what I just told you. And I was terrified, Mike. Like, you know that this tends to be a male-dominated industry, right? Yeah. And I just, and men sort of, there's this stereotype that I actually don't think is true, that men are, less feeling or less caring, or, they don't want the fluff and foo-foo, whatever. But I thought, you know what, I'm just going to share this thing because I just feel like I need to. I'm going to share this story. I tell the story, and immediately these two advisors, left-hand side of the room, third row, their hands go shooting up, and I'm like, oh gosh, what are they going to say? So I hesitantly call on them, and I'm like, yes. And the advisor on the left says, I just want you to know, like literally, Mike, these were his words. Ready for this? He said, I just want you to know, I will believe anything you say right now. Wow. Those were his exact words. And I remember thinking, are you kidding me? I've been trying to prove myself for the last 7 years. Yeah. With all of my great accomplishments and all of the other advisors I've helped and all the study and all the certifications, and all I had to do was tell my story and tell you why I care. And now you're saying you're going to believe anything I say? It was a life-changing moment. Wow. Then I call on the guy next to him, like, yes. He goes, thank you so much for understanding what we do and why we do it. It is so great to have a speaker come in who's not just trying to like sell us an idea, but actually understands our mission. Yeah. And at that moment, my career had been going very well, but it went on like a nice climb to like started catapulting, like speaking fees tripling, incoming requests, increasing, my coaching clients getting better results. It was unbelievable. And then I started thinking, was this a fluke? Is this because I'm a speaker and a consultant? Like, would this work for advisors and wholesalers? So I started taking select advisors and wholesalers I was working with, and I started teaching it to them. And guess what? They started having the same results. Yep. Wow. Yeah. It reminds me of this, I love reading old books and research, and because that's the foundation of where we are today. People just kind of polish it up and make it their own. But there was a Canadian philosopher back in the 60s, Marshall McLuhan. He wrote a book called The Medium is the Message. And he says the way we send and receive information is more important than the information itself. So what you just described, you would be the medium. And the way you send and receive information, the story, the emotion, all of that is more important than the stuff, the number stuff. So 100%. So here's a showstopper, pattern interrupt. How do you get someone to say to you, I will believe anything you say right now? Yeah. How do you get to that point? Yeah. Are you asking me? Is this rhetorical, or are you asking me? It's rhetorical, and I think it ties into what you teach. The way you get there is you have a compelling messaging strategy, platform, foundation of how you articulate what you do and why you do it. Yeah, yeah, and they've got to connect with your heart. They've got to connect with your soul. So the why story is the first story. That's the first story. The other story is what at Crazy Good Talks we call your desire story. And I'll say stories because ideally you're going to have multiple desire stories. Okay. So desire stories, Mike, are typically stories about clients. They can be your own results, but usually with advisors, it's about clients that they have helped get great results. And it's like, those house shows where they're like, move that bus, and it's the before and the after. Yep. Yeah. It's that type of thing. So it's written in a very specific storytelling structure to really highlight the before and the after, where the client was before they worked with you, where they are now after or while they're working with you. And so the point of the desire story is to evoke desire in the hearts and minds of the listener to achieve those same or similar types of results. Yeah. And the reason why I say you should have multiple is ideally you're going to have one for your overarching financial planning process. And then you're going to have niche specific desire stories for the niches you serve, or product or service specific desire stories.
Sure.
Yeah. And so when I was speaking, when I first, started in the industry, and for the first 6 years, all I told were the desire stories as a way to really increase my credibility and desire for my services. And I thought that was enough. I didn't realize that I had to go a level deeper. And a lot of times, to be honest with you, yes, the desire stories are super powerful, but the why story still trumps it every day of the week, which is counterintuitive to what I think most of us, are taught.
Yeah, I can see that, but yet at the same time, one builds on the other. Once they know your why and can relate personally with you, and maybe on different levels, like, oh, I didn't know you had a daughter with type 1 diabetes, so do I, and now you're connecting, or whatever the point is. And then now you can go, hey, wouldn't it be great if, and you can create that aspirational identity, that goal, that North Star for them, and then it's like, hey, I could take you there.
Yeah, totally. Yes, I agree.
So then the desire stories, what's next after that?
So then the third, and this is the one when advisors are told to tell stories, this is the one that 99.9% of them, if not all of them, know they should be telling, is the story to illustrate a point.
Yeah. So
those are the stories that you share in order to make things that are complex simple, or to drive home something you really want your client to remember. And the whole purpose is just to teach. And those are great. I mean, those are relevant, right? You need those. But most advisors are not aware, there's different types of stories. And the thing with stories is that the story has a specific job to do. So the thing that I get frustrated with is that there's a lot of gurus out there saying, tell stories, but there's no gurus out there saying, these are the types of stories you need, and they have a job to do. So you don't pull out a desire story when really you need a why story, and vice versa. You don't pull out a story to illustrate a point when it should be a desire story. You have to be very clear on what the job is
and
that story is aiming to do.
What's the name of the third one there that you just mentioned?
Story to illustrate a point.
Illustrate a point. It reminds me of kind of like a case study. Like, you don't just give some bland white paper case study. You're going to build a story around that case study.
Correct. And the desire story could be used in a case study also.
Yes. Yeah.
So it could be either one. And it just depends on what the purpose of the case study is.
Well,
and so that's where people have to be clear.
Yep. And the target audience and the niche, all of those things. Yeah. I guess what you're saying is you better know your story enough to be able to then weave in the why, the desire, and then illustrate a point stories.
Correct. And to know when they should be used and what the job is.
Yeah. It kind of is a lot more than just, here's this fill in the blank document. Just do that. You're good to go. See ya.
That's why I hesitated to use the word simple.
Yeah.
The idea is simple. Just tell stories, but there's so much to it. There's an art, there's a science, there's strategy. That's what makes it exciting. That's why I geek out over this stuff.
Yep. Like a methodology behind that. When someone says this, then if this, then that. If they say this, then you'll want to use this. And it's like old school sales closing techniques. You want to overcome an objection before they have it. Well, in your world, in your example here, you want to use these stories in specific places so that it really sears in a certain point that you want made, so that they're not going to be questioning or bringing up objections, that they're tracking right there with you, getting them to the point of, I will believe anything you say. So I would venture to say that you could be like the Obi-Wan Kenobi, I am training this Jedi, but you must use this power for good.
Right. Oh, 100%. And then that's so funny. Gosh, I'm like, you and I are connected in some way, cosmic way, because that is something I always say is okay, now you know the power of the why story, but you have to use it for good.
Yeah. I mean, that's what a lot of NLP practitioners and a lot of, the persuasion practitioners will say is this really is a scientific way of presenting and selling and closing. But man, be ethical and use it for good. And if it's not a good fit for someone, don't, put them in the position where they feel compelled to say yes. And now they wake up and it's like, oh, well, that's not the best thing for me. Absolutely. Yes. Love it. Well, I think we could probably continue for about 3.5 more hours and still be catching our first breath. So why don't we wrap up with saying, hey, if someone is listening to this and going, ooh, Deirdre's got some cool stuff, and if I want to learn how to craft my crazy good talk with some of these steps in the blueprint and some of these stories, what's the best way they can reach out and connect with you and learn more about your blueprint? Yeah, no, thanks for asking. So I would offer 3 ways. One would be to listen to the Crazy Good Talks podcast. So Crazy Good Talks podcast, we give, we drop episodes twice a month, and we give great strategies on how to be a really powerful communicator, presenter, writer, speaker, storyteller. The other is I'm very active on LinkedIn. So if you want to look for me on LinkedIn, ask me to connect. I'm an open networker. Would love to connect with you. And then the third is our website, which is crazygoodtalks.com. Awesome. Well, Deirdre, thank you so much. I'll make sure to have those links in the show notes. And I really appreciate your time coming on today. And it was really a pleasure bringing you on and learning from your experience. Thanks so much. Yeah, I appreciate it, Mike. Thank you.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.